Hi, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm working with the cream makeup from that Halloween makeup kit, and I am just getting ready to swatch it on canvas and colored paper again. For some reason, most of these materials are better on paper than canvas, which is strange to me because you would think like human skin is textured and canvas is textured, but it didn't seem to work out that way. So I'm just testing, swatching it, blending it, and doubling it down. Now what I'm doing is just getting that preliminary sketch down. We're just speeding through it because again, it's a little boring. I think starting November I might skip the sketches, but we'll see. Now I'm just lightening the sketch so it doesn't show through. And here is our reference photo. So I'm just kind of blending different shades of gray essentially because it's monotone, it's just black and white, which did make it really hard for me to keep the motivation. I like color, I like happy, fun colors, and happy, fun paintings. And although this scene was really interesting, I did take this reference photo myself. I visited a historical graveyard over by one of my friends from the 1800s, I think. It was 1800s into the early 1900s. It was very interesting. It was kind of fun to explore, admittedly. At this point, I'm just kind of blocking in some of the colors, adding detail a little early, but I am just blocking in some colors, blocking in main focal points, essentially, and adding some shading and detail. What's really interesting about the part I'm working on now as far as the reference photo itself goes and where I was at was that rock is actually a gravestone as well. If I remember correctly, it was a child, so I don't know if it was originally a rock and it was like a gravestone that broke down over time, but it was a gravestone. It was very small and it was very old. It was one of the older ones there. I started out working on this piece without any water, just blocking everything in. Over time, I did eventually add water to thin it and layer it differently, as well as cleaning up spots that overlapped. I would just kind of wet my brush and wash it off. What you're seeing here is I'm adding the highlights, which was very important to keep everything separated, but it also gave it that definition that it needed. This tree in the middle was difficult. It was very textured. I was trying to add the texture. I think for the most part I did okay by the end, but it was tough. There was a lot of trees, which mostly ended up being more dark. I did add some shadows and highlights to most of them. Further back ones I did just make black though. Although you can't see what I'm doing here, I'm just adding a base layer of white for the highlighted areas on the ground and adding a base color for all those fallen leaves and dirt. I'm glad I did that as a base layer, but I do end up adding a lot of detail like I'm doing here. And I think I'm gonna leave a surprise until later on, but I ended up using a different technique on the ground that I wish I had done sooner. It would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of frustration trying to get the details of. I wasn't trying to go exact on the leaves, but I was trying to get an idea. So every time I switch colors, I kind of added it to the ground to try and give the different shades. But you'll see what I did later. It really changed the game in this piece. You can see now that I am adding those details onto that tree and struggling. It kind of looks ridiculous. So there was a twig in the reference photo that I really liked. I ended up pretty much redoing this by the end, but I think it gave it some really valuable interest. And just going back over those highlights, because this paint didn't dry super solid. It was very transparent. It was almost like, the best way I can describe it is like a textured acrylic. And when I say textured, I don't mean like a heavy body acrylic where it has texture in it. It's almost like satin. It's very like soft and buttery to the touch. So it was very interesting feeling it after, but I had to be careful not to touch it too much because it was re-wettable. So if I touched it for too long and oil on my hands or sweat would lift it back up. And I found that out towards the end when I tore it off of a sketch pad. I'm just trying to add some definition in. This is kind of the ugly phase, and just about every drawing has an ugly phase. This is where everything just looks messy, unfinished, and this is kind of the point where you're not sure if it's going to be good or not, but you've just got to trust the process, and it'll come through. It even if it doesn't, you've just got to make sure it's fun, you're enjoying yourself, and it's practice. If nothing else, it's practice, and that's how you get good at art. Is you just keep doing it. Now I'm kind of going back over that base background to give it a slightly off-white color, a little bit darker in some spots, so that I can add the white highlights of the leaves. So I'm pretty much painting the leaves now, and then I'll subtract them with white later. here comes that surprise that I did for the leaves. So I just kind of painted the paints on the sponge.
Okay, that totally works. Alright, now I want to try something else. No. I'm not loving that. I'm loving that. Okay.
And then I tested it with the makeup sponge it came with and hated it. You can see here that I accidentally painted over that rock, but I do go back over it and fix it. Now I'm just kind of trying to get a little closer and adding definition. You might be able to tell that I actually cut a wedge out of that sponge so that I can get in a little closer. And you can see now where those highlights were a lot better, and now I'm just kind of adding some of those leaves back in with little dashes and splotches. And I'm going over and cleaning up my lines. And you can see in the background now I'm cleaning up those trees and kind of filling them in, adding definition. When I did that background, I was pretty sloppy with it. So I'm just fixing them up, cleaning them up. Some of them, like, I'm pretty sure it's an oak behind that tombstone right here in the corner where my wrist is. I'm adding a lot of texture to the bark. I already did add quite a bit, but I'm really touching it up now. And I realized that I laid my wrist into that tree. This made such a difference, in my opinion, to that tree back there. Adding the light through the leaves, and that just made it so nice. And now you can see where I'm fixing that branch. My rock's back! I did really like how that rock looked, and I will be going back in and touching it up and adding more details so it doesn't look as flat. Now we're adding some variation to the background, giving it some darker and lighter spots. What I'm doing here is just stippling the white paint to give the effect of the leaves. I didn't expect to get much detail from this paint. I actually got a lot more than I was anticipating. So what I decided to do from the start is to almost go at it in an abstract manner and do like textured paintbrush strokes and everything like that. Now I'm adding the leaves to the trees in the background and not just on the floor. So I'm pretty much doing the same technique. I'm just being very careful of where it's at. And then with the paintbrush, I went back in and added some dark spots so you can see that it's not fully opaque. And always signing your name. I do go back and add more details though, as you'll see in a moment. Please like and subscribe. I hope you guys liked this painting, and don't forget to be artsy.